Hey, how you doing? It's time to change strings on my P-Bass, and I'm going to show you guys how I do that. I've got a brand new set of D'Addario Chromes, flat wounds. I find them really good on the P-Bass. This has got round wounds on it at the moment, but I'm switching back to the flat wound, so we'll go through how I do that. First things first, we need to detune the old strings. Make sure that they're nice and loose. So they're all nice and loose there, and you can take them off the post, feed them out of the bridge, but I just generally cut them with my trusty cutters. And now I can feed the short ends out through the back of the bridge, being careful not to scratch the finish. Throw those out, pop those off. And now we have the bass without the strings on, which is a good opportunity to give it a clean. Now, this has a maple fretboard, so the maple fretboard is finished, and you don't need to put any lemon oil or anything like that on this. If your frets are really dirty or really showing signs of build-up, give them just a clean with a sort of a metal polish and a clean rag. It doesn't take too much. Be careful of the finish, but the fretboard on this is quite good, so I usually just give it a good wipe down just to get any sweat off it, any sort of build up. And while I'm in this stage, because there's no strings, I'll take the time to actually give the bodywork a bit of a polish. This one doesn't really need much. I'll normally just use a good polish on it, give it a polish front back, make sure it's all clean, looks nice, and then I can move to the next stage, which is putting the strings on. This gauge is a 45 to 100. This is a Steve Harris signature bass. It's got a 7 1/4 inch fretboard radius. Steve Harris uses 50 to 110, which are quite heavy gauge flat wounds. I like them a little bit more flexible, so I'm going to use these. And always be mindful when you're unwinding strings not to let them poke your skin or your eyes, quite importantly. So this actually tells me that the E is brass. You can tell it's the thickest string, but it's always helpful to know that. And carefully unwind it and carefully feed it through the bridge. Now, because I'm changing the string type and the gauge, the setup is something I'll have to go through again. So the intonation, the height of the bridge saddles, and the truss rod adjustment to get the right curve. Now, on a 7 1/4 inch neck, Fender recommends 0.014 inches of relief in the neck. I shoot a little bit lower than that, and I'm going for 0.012. You can adjust that to taste. And on the action side of the bridge, it recommends 7/64 on the bass side, 6/64 on the treble side, so the E and G strings respectively, and the other two somewhere in the middle. Now I'm just going to show you. You need to go 4 inches past the post that the string is going on, and I know, because I've measured this before, that on standard Fender bass setups that the distance between say the E post and the D post, which is 2 posts away, is about 4 inches, and they recommend 4 inches past the post to get at least 2 or 3 good wraps around the post, and I'll show you how a close-up of how that happens. So this is the E string and it's going to that post, so I'm going to bend it at this post here, the D string post. If I was installing the D string, I usually grab it with my finger, pull it back to that post, and then put my other hand here, which is about 4 inches, and then I will put a bend here and cut it, so that when I get to that post I have the required 4 inches. In this case it's the E string, so I pull it straight, I'll put my pliers here at the post, and I put a 90-degree bend, just like that. And you need to do that, even though it's got the silk wrapping, you still don't want the outside windings of the string to detach from the core, and that's the safest way to do it, and I do that with all strings. Then you can cut it about that far down. So we've got a little bit of string that goes into the post. I can wind that on. The shape of the post will naturally try and push the string windings downwards, keep them pretty tight, and by the time you get to tuning pitch, it's going to have 2 or 3 good windings around the post. And that's the E string done, and I'm going to do the other strings in the same fashion. And now the strings are installed, and you can see that they've all got at least 2 good wraps around the post there, so they won't be going anywhere. Now bring those strings up to pitch in the playing position. So hold your bass in the playing position and tune the strings to pitch, and we're going to be doing this a few times as we adjust things when we stretch the strings, so you need to keep that tuner handy throughout almost the whole process. And you'll notice as they all tension up that some of the others will drop a bit. So we've got that relatively in tune now. Now you need to give the strings a gentle stretch, and what I mean by gentle is not very hard at all. Put your fingers under the strings, go to about the 12th fret, just give them a very gentle tug. If you pull them too hard, you will separate the outer windings from the core and the string will go dead. This is just to release any slack in the post, and just to give them a sort of settle in. Now that I've done that, I retune, and they've dropped a little bit, and they've only dropped a little bit because the installation of the string was properly done, so they haven't dropped that much in pitch. So now I have that basically in tune, and now I can move on to the next thing, which is the relief on the neck. And as I've explained this before, but it's worth going through this again. Now, I'm going to look like a bit of a minor 49er here with my headlight, but it's actually a good tool to allow you to see what it is that you're looking for. So I recommend them, even though they might look a little bit silly. So I put the capo on the first fret. I press the string down at the last fret. I'm looking for a measurement at the 7th, and because these strings have more tension than the previous strings, I can see there's a tiny gap, a very tiny gap there in the between the fret and the bottom of the string, and I'm using in my case, a 0.012 inch. Now normally for the 7¼ inch neck it's going to be a 0.014. I'll just go a little bit lower, that's my preference. So to adjust for that, I use the truss rod wrench. I tighten it very slightly, and remember, with these things you go 1/8 of a turn, maximum 1/4 of a turn to adjust. Now we need to check the tuning again, because it may affect it a little bit. Okay, and we take another measurement. And I've gone a little bit too far, so I'm going to back that off slightly. Very, very slight. Retune. You may have to do this several times to get it right. Some truss rods are more sensitive than others, but it's always a good idea not to go too far with cranking them. You can break them if you over tighten. And that's about right. To check the nut, especially if you're changing gauges, just put your finger on the 3rd fret, and there should be a small gap between the top of the 1st fret and the bottom of the string. And when I say small, it's business card or less thickness. If it's a lot more, you'll find it very hard to fret here in the 1st position, normally the 1st fret. If it's too low, the open string will rattle against the fret. Once you fret a note, it takes the nut right out of the equation. So when this one's okay, because it did have at one stage 1/10s on it, on the E string, so it's fine. What I do, if the nut's too high, you need to file it down, but you need to have the right size file which sort of matches the gauge of the string. And if you're not competent at doing that, get somebody that a guitar tech to do it, because you don't want to get that wrong and have to change your nut. It's a messy job. So now what I normally do is, again, I use the capo, and I have a little metal ruler graduated in 32nds, 64ths and millimeters, and the spec doesn't actually call for the capo on the first fret, but I actually put that on to take the nut out of the equation. And I can see that in this case my E string is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 64ths, and my G string is at 4 64ths. Now the spec on a 7¼ inch radius neck calls for 7 64ths on the E string and 6 64ths on the G string. Now that's quite playable, there's nothing wrong with that, but I just go that little bit lower. So probably what I'm going to shoot for here is leave that at the 6 64ths and bring this one up to, I think, probably about 5. I'm already at sort of 2/32 or 4 64ths, and this is where this light comes in very handy, right? So I can see that yet. So again, you just need the right wrench for your bridge, for the Allen screws here, to make the adjustment. Now you have to make sure that you're using the correct Allen wrench for these Allen screws, because otherwise you'll damage them and they'll become inoperable. So you won't be able to make adjustments. So I really want to bring the G string up here. So I go like a half a turn or so at a time, and I'm trying to keep the saddle even on both sides. So I don't want it doing that to outside. I want it to be level. So once I adjust that, and I'm checking the measurement here, so from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string, and I'm shooting for 5 64ths. Which I've got there. So I've got 5 there, and I've got 6 here. So these are going to be somewhere in the middle. At the moment they're a little low. Yep. So that looks about right there. I think the bridge is adjusted correctly. The strings, I know they're hard to see, are following the curvature of the fretboard, getting slightly higher towards the bass side. So now we need to tune up again. So we retune, and the next thing that we want to check is the harmonics, or that the bass at the 12th fret, the string is in pitch with the open string. So this G is slightly sharp, so that saddle needs to move back towards the bottom of the bass here. Now to do that, I need to get myself a screwdriver, which is a Phillips head, detune the string so there's not a lot of tension on the saddle, and I need to tighten this screw by turning it clockwise. So I'm bringing that back a little bit, and then I will retune the string. And check it again. And that's spot on now. And I'm going to do the same thing with all the other strings. So the open string and fretted at the 12th fret, and the D is slightly sharp, and this is normal if you're going for a thicker gauge of strings. It's quite important to do that because as you go up the neck, you don't want the bass sounding slightly out of tune to the other instruments, which it will if the bridge is out of whack to any degree. And now that's spot on, and I can check a few notes on the fretboard. Yep, that's pretty good. Yep. Excellent. Now that you've put new strings on the bass, it's always a good idea to have a clean cloth so that when you're finished playing, give them a wipe, run the cloth underneath them, give them a wipe underneath, and your strings will last longer that way because you're just removing all the sweat, and that stops all the crud from building up on the strings. And now that we've done all that, it's time to plug it in and see what it sounds like. Sounds exactly like a P bass with flat wound should, nice and chunky. So it feels really good after the setup. Very comfortable, all over the neck. Super chunky slab. That's how I do my string changes and my setup right afterwards. And once you've done that, if you're sticking with the same brand and gauge of strings, which means the tension is the same, you won't have to do the adjustments here again, most probably. You, with seasonal changes, will have to adjust the relief of the neck, and that's about it. So if you always remember about 4 inches, put a bend in the string, cut it, put it in the post, get some nice tight wraps around the post. You can't go wrong. And that's it. So until next time, keep playing guys, have a good time, enjoy yourselves, keep making music.